hot-footed it from the Lords to chair this meeting, into which I was drafted this morning. So if I seem less than totally on top of things, you'll have to excuse me. Anyway, welcome. This is the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Apprenticeships. We are talking about apprenticeships and AI. AI is something which I really recognise I need to know something about, and I've not managed to do so as yet. So I'm looking forward to considerable elucidation today. We are going to explore how generative AI is already being used in training and careers, how employers and training providers can take advantage of AI and also regulate its use, and what the future of apprenticeships looks like as AI develops. And we'll also be discussing how AI can be integrated into apprenticeships to ensure that more young people can access new skills needed for the future. And since my principal passion in the Lords is all to do with education, skills, apprenticeships, and all those good things, the one I'm missing is AI, so I'm looking to fill that gap today. Now we've got three speakers. They're all here, I'm delighted to say, and the connection is working well for the time being. So each of them will have between 5 and 10 minutes to speak to us. And then we will have time for some questions and answers, starting as usual with MPs and peers and parliamentarians, and that will bring us to the end of the session. So why don't we launch straight in with Erica Farmer, who's speaking from remotely. I don't know where she is, but she's on the screen, which is a good start. Who is the business director of Quantum Rise Talent Group Limited. So, Erica, we're delighted to have you, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, and it's fantastic to be here. Thank you very much for the insight and the invite to be here with you today. So, very quick introduction. Erica Farmer, co-founder and business director of Quantum Rise Talent Group. We're a digital learning and development consultancy working with clients in the corporate and apprenticeship and education sector. My background is 20 years corporate learning and development with some of the UK's largest brands such as British Gas, LV, Specsavers and Virgin. Having run apprenticeship programmes for large numbers of apprentices at British Gas in the engineering sector, chairing the customer service trailblazer, creating the new customer service standards, and also the apprenticeships at Virgin Care, and then gone on to really work in the digital learning and tech space, particularly with apprenticeship training providers and large levy payers in corporate L&D. So I think that's kind of what's qualified me to share my insight with you guys today. So I've got a few slides, as you can see on the screen. I talk to organizations about AI, and this is the one thing that I tend to share with them as a kind of an opening statement is generative AI is the worst that it will ever be right now. And I ask people to think about that. And I often get responses from, that's super exciting because it means it's only going to get better and make our lives easier and make our organizations more productive. But then I also get responses saying, well, I don't know how I feel about that right now, because I hear that AI is going to take our jobs, or AI isn't going to take our jobs, but someone who knows how to use AI is going to take our jobs. And if we think about particularly young people in early careers and apprenticeships, this is also the narrative that they'll be hearing right now, whether on the media or for organizations or from their peers. So apprenticeships and colleges and providers and universities have a really great opportunity right now to not only grasp the skills that sit around artificial intelligence in the workforce, but also to embed them as learning tools within the delivery and the design of our educational programs. However, we're not seeing that kind of transition at the moment right now, even though we're seeing a lot of stats. For example, 71% of organizations are saying that they're integrating tools into their AI tools into their organizations right now. So a lot of education and learning folk are saying, yeah, we're on it, we're using Gen AI, we're working with it, we're integrating it into our organization one way or another. And the World Economic Forum and the LinkedIn Learning Report in 2023 also tells us that organizations are using digital technology over the next 3 years. And Deloitte tells us this year, well, apparently it was the year that we were going to learn to trust our AI colleagues, which is quite an interesting phraseology if you think about the word trust and the word colleagues. But we're seeing a huge amount of fear around the terminology of AI because people don't quite know and they don't quite understand what it means, particularly around this negative narrative. I'm calling that the fear gap. I think we've got our early adopters when it comes to this technology, but we've got a huge amount of people who sit in this fear gap of adoption when it comes to AI. Why is that? Well, we've been brought up with movies that talks about artificial intelligence becoming self-aware and becoming our robot overlords and this kind of stuff. But actually, we're also in that space because we don't know the impact of what using generative AI is going to mean to us on our jobs. So when I go out to particularly apprenticeship learning providers and this sector in this space, and I ask them, what are you doing to harness artificial intelligence, or how are you bringing those skills to your apprentices or your students or your employers, your levy payers? You kind of get a bit of a blank look. And I was at a university conference a couple of weeks ago, and it's very much that kind of people are looking to each other to understand what establishments and institutions are doing in this space. And there isn't a huge amount. We've got the first followers, we've got some Corndells of the world or lifetime trainings of the world in the independent training provider space. And we've got some universities such as Liverpool John Moores who teach machine learning and artificial intelligence in their curriculum anyway. But we're not in the space now where we've got a huge number of specifics or practicals or use cases where generative AI is actually being used and delivered as a skill set for young people or for education and learning practitioners, introducing it and being more creative and reducing time and cost when it comes to things like content creation. And I think this is because of the fear gap. So in my experience, I think that we need to spend more time winning the hearts and minds of independent training providers, universities, schools, colleges, to understand the art of the possible when it comes to generative AI, because there isn't a silver bullet around this. There isn't an operations manual that I can send to you right now that says this is how we use Gen AI in education and learning. Now, we've had the EU AI, try and say that when you've had a few drinks, the EU AI legislation, which came out first version on Friday. So we're going to start getting some rules and regulations around how we should be using AI and the risks and the penalties for not using AI in the right way. But again, we're very much at the beginning of that. And again, you speak to these institutions, you speak to training providers on the whole, and it feels very conceptual. It feels very out there, it feels very techie or marketing. It doesn't feel like a really practical tool that I can use to enhance the quality of the education and what we're delivering, or the learning experience of the apprentices or the students that we're working with. So some of the work that I've been doing in this sector is around helping people to think about a plan of action. So starting to make this stuff real rather than conceptual. And I think if I had any advice and guidance for anybody working in these sectors, helping universities and apprenticeship providers, and I say universities because more and more universities are delivering higher apprenticeships, level 4, level 5, for example, level 6. And I use storytelling to get these guys on board. This is a hearts and minds thing, particularly with something that's really emotional. And the storytelling I like to use, or whether you're into kind of superheroes or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is thinking about someone like Marvel's Iron Man, so Tony Stark representing the people. So what do our people need in this digital revolution? The Iron Man suit that effectively is the infrastructure that sits around and allows Tony Stark to become a superhero. And then you bring in the artificial intelligence technology to bring it all together. And I still speak to a lot of employers and organizations that go straight to the artificial intelligence, but they don't think about the people and they don't think about the infrastructure. So we've got to really consider not just the hearts and minds, the journey that people go on from an artificial intelligence perspective and how they're feeling about this right now. But when I say the infrastructure, I mean the digital ethics and integrity policies and the behavioural frameworks for organisations, which make it clear for me as a learner or a student or somebody in the workforce to understand that I can be using generative AI in one way, but I shouldn't be using it in another way. And that comes into things like data privacy and data protection, for example. So again, making things practical with AI, I think, is the breakthrough when it comes to our educational establishments. And I think sharing of best practice amongst independent training providers, universities, colleges, etc., is a great way to do that. Something simple like the structure that you see on the screen right now, ensuring organizations are speaking to each other internally around AI and the opportunities that this can bring. What's the terms of reference at how they're going to use AI, and what does that mean in terms of how they communicate, and the digital ethics and integrity policies that sit around that. Making sure that as a member of the workforce or as an apprentice or a student, I understand what the right behaviors are around using this technology, but I also understand that I can build my what I call human distinctive skills, which are things like learning agility, critical thinking, problem solving, around just using the AI just to kick out content. Because if we get this right, if independent training providers really step up in the forefront of this effectively digital revolution workforce 4.0, then they could lead the way when it comes to our workforce of the future, rather than just stepping back and waiting for somebody else to do it. So little tasks working with students and working with managers of apprentices and students, just getting them to use artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT or Google Bard or Microsoft Copilot that's just launched, Microsoft's offering, just getting them to use this technology and getting comfortable and starting to build that confidence and reducing that fear gap, I think personally is the way forwards. But we're not seeing a huge amount of action and activity in this space. So I'm going to wrap this up now by basically saying that we've got such an opportunity as education providers to lead the way in this technology, which there isn't a magic bullet for. There isn't an operations manual, but we need to be brave enough to take the step forward and effectively have a go, rather than waiting for somebody else to pick up the reins. So thank you very much. I'll wrap my session up there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Erica. We'll save any questions, I think, till after all three
okay,
speakers.
Thank you.
Well done on wrapping up just as I was beginning to feel the itch to wrap you up myself, but very well timed. Now, our next speaker is Mary Amanuel. Mary is a Multiverse apprentice in the NHS. We've all heard a great deal about Multiverse and you and Blair's role in setting up this fantastic apprenticeship organisation. So it's very good to hear from you, Mary. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Chair, may I speak my apologies that I'm not going to be able to say to hear you. Thank you for the participation. Thank you.
Nothing I did, I okay.
Hello everyone, I'm Mary Amanuel. I am an apprentice, a degree apprentice in data science with Multiverse, and I'm also working in data science in the NHS, the National Health Service. I want to touch on three key things today: why I did a degree apprenticeship in data science and tech, what kind of skills I'm gaining through my apprenticeship that relate to AI, and thirdly, I want to give some really strong recommendations about how we can better support young people like me to be AI ready in the future. So why did I do a degree in data science? Well, when I was younger, nobody was actually talking about data science or AI as a career. It wasn't really a thing. It was more something you see in the movies, but it wasn't something talked about. Nor were apprenticeships, actually. People didn't talk about doing apprenticeships as well. And I'm not talking decades ago, I'm talking 2019. So I'm talking a few years ago. So this wasn't really part of the conversation. So when I was growing up, I grew up in council housing, I was on pupil premium, I was on preschool meals. And I knew very early on, when I was younger, in order to escape my circumstances, I would have to do something radically different to my peers in order to thrive in the 21st century and to have social mobility. And when I was younger, I was lucky enough to do some internships with the Social Mobility Foundation. They support young people in underserved communities to get access to corporate training and things like that. And I realized that I learned so much more from, a week at a, company, engineering company, than I did in a lot of my secondary school. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so when I approached, deciding my A-levels, and I did apply to university, I got into 5 Oxford University. I thought, you know what, I really want to do something different for my life. And I want to do 2 things. I want to do an apprenticeship that gives me solid programming skills, and also helps society, so has social good. So I came across Multiverse a few years ago, and they had a sort of a scheme, a data analytics apprenticeship, which I applied for and I got in. And essentially what we do in the NHS is we use, basically, data science is the intersection of computer science, statistics, and sort of data analysis. And it's essentially you're helping your organizations understand their complex data sets to drive decision making. So I support the NHS with better evidence-based decision making, essentially. So these could be questions like, okay, what does my waiting list in A&E look like in the next 3 weeks? These are the kinds of questions we're looking for. So in terms of the skills that I'm getting from my apprenticeship, I'm really, really lucky that all my skills, because my apprenticeship is so dynamic, are relevant to my job now. So these are things like understanding how data works, understanding how to get data from systems, understanding the bias of these systems, how they are trained, understanding how to build my own models, not just looking at others, but how do I build my own? How am I applying that in the NHS? How am I communicating insights that I'm gaining in my apprenticeship and through my technical education to my employer? How am I convincing in that way? So it's a really practical education that focuses on soft skills, which are actually not soft, very difficult soft skills of communication. Very hard to communicate technical things properly, but also the hard skills of being able to get stuck in the back of actually what's going on in the back end. So these 2 things. And 2 ways I've applied this practically in the NHS is I work on the early warning system. It's an award-winning AI model that predicts admissions and bed forecasting for COVID 3 weeks in advance. So I'm in the technical team for that, troubleshooting that model, understanding how it works, supporting with forecasting. And the second thing is I co-founded a Python community for healthcare that's helping NHS staff. We've got about 1,000 people, helping them learn how to program and how to share their code and making sure everyone is learning from each other. So those are 2 practical things. And in terms of my recommendations, I have 3 recommendations. One is kind of going counter to everything I've said, which is forget about AI. I was teaching data skills at a underserved school in South London a few months ago. And, these are 15, 16-year-olds. And I thought they would be fantastic at technology. Yes, they're fantastic at social media, but ask them to write an email with an attachment, take a screenshot, they are struggling. They are really struggling. And these kids, of course, are very underserved. They don't have access to laptops. They don't have anyone to email. But I think we need to focus on those fundamental digital skills before we jump to AI. I think there's a real lack in computer science education now that's not serving young people. So we need to address that foundation first. Secondly, I think one of the things that I've heard from research at MIT is that AI, generative AI, has had the biggest benefit to those who are least experienced. Why don't we extend that to education and help this AI revolution, help in data science AI support the most disadvantaged in our society, get access to the most amount of knowledge. So this is something I think that's very critical, making sure disadvantaged people are not left behind further, but we use this to level them up and give them access to knowledge. The third thing is, trying to remember, yes, we need to think about AI not as a replacement, but as an augmentation. An augmentation is as an aid, as a leveling up, not as a replacement for critical thinking skills. The things with AI, it doesn't think, doesn't feel, and what I like to say, AI has no soul, but humans do. And we need to help young people use them intelligently in their roles, mindfully and ethically.
Thank you very much, Mary. Lots to think about there, and particularly like the insight that being very good on social media doesn't mean you actually have digital skills. So I'm sure there will be some questions about that. I'm very glad to see one of my colleagues, Lord Hampton, Johnny Hampton, who is himself a teacher, secondary teacher of design and technology, I think. Welcome. Right, our final speaker is sitting next to me, Dean Russell, the MP for Watford. So I will hand straight over to you, Dean.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's great to hear both former speakers who got amazing points. I'll try not to repeat them. The reason why I've probably been asked, I don't quite know, but I can is often the case. But actually, my background before being an MP, I studied physics for many years and then worked in the digital creative industries for many years in different guises, digital transformation, all sorts. And in fact, when you mentioned about the multiverse, about 15 years ago, there was a thing called Second Life, which some of you might remember. And Second Life was the first sort of multiverse, as it were. And I did one of the first ever projects to create a brand for a university around a Second Life avatar. So it goes way back, and I've worked in the past with artificial intelligence organisations pre being an MP. And the reason why I say that is that I'm probably of the generation that in the 90s going to university, I'm 47, and in the 90s was probably the last point where next generations had the similar types of job opportunities as the previous generations. I'm the generation where not just social media happened whilst I was in my career, but actually prior to that, just email. I didn't get my first email address until I was doing my research after being at university for my degree. And then social media was something I was very involved in the early stages. And that's why I think when talking about this with regard to apprentices, and in particular around skills, is that it's an understanding that we can't yet really predict what those skills will be. What we can do is be mindful of the fact that there'll be skills and things that we learn about being creative in our approach and flexible and understand how the world might change. But I think what it also has meant is that through lived experience of seeing how social media, as one example, can be used for really great good in the world, but also really great bad in the world. And it's understanding that artificial intelligence will have a similar role, which it can be like fire. It can keep you warm at night and save your life, or it could burn things down and be very dangerous. And it's understanding where that sits within people's careers. And I think within that you have various aspects, especially for apprenticeships, around how do you create jobs and create the seeds of careers where we don't know how that career might progress in the next 5-10 years. And I think the same way as we saw automation in manufacturing massively affected. My dad was a lorry driver, we haven't had robots yet driving lorries, but the working class world changed dramatically when robots went into factories, and those sorts of jobs changed dramatically. We're now seeing white collar jobs be dramatically changed, and I think we need to be mindful of that accountants and other jobs which traditionally might not have been seen as a threat will have those. And I think the sort of my sort of 8 C's, as it were, of AI for the purposes of today is really, first of all, I think we need to understand how. I'll be very quick with them. I see the watch being checked. The 8 C's. I think one is about competitiveness. Competitiveness in one's career, in one's opportunity, competitiveness for businesses, how AI is applied within the workplace and how that's used in its various guises is going to be really crucial. And actually access to that has to be normalized, because you can't make it so that one organisation or one type of career or one school from a particular area can't access the skills and the tools to do that. Second one is about consistency and ties into that. How do we make sure that access is consistent, but also the usability of it, the access in terms of actually using it. I did a lot of work in the early 2001, 2002 around online accessibility. I wrote what I believe was the UK's first course on online accessibility and worked with the RNIB on the world's first online accessible game. And what we learned there was sometimes things can look brilliant to the world, but actually back then there were massive barriers for people with especially visual impairments, but disabilities generally. Most of the features that now appear in phones for accessibility, which all of us use, were born out of the fact that actually it was groups that were people with disabilities that couldn't use them. And then suddenly people went, oh, actually, it's quite useful changing the font size of text. Actually, that's useful for everybody. So it's understanding that and that consistency for everyone. Third is about collaboration. How do we use these tools to enable collaboration during the apprenticeship period? You know, how do you use those skills? I mean, the joke from my generation was, you know, kids always knew how to use a video recorder and parents didn't. But the reality now is it's gone way beyond that. I mean, how many parents know how to upload something on TikTok? You know, actually goes way beyond it. It's become a societal shift rather than a shift within tools within the home. Fourth is a massive one, which is about copyright and understanding within which is my fifth point, which is about creativity, that those go together, copyright and creativity, as two C's together, because actually somebody who's coming in as an apprentice within the creative industries may not fully comprehend or understand the risks of copyright and therefore the brand risks for an organisation by doing the wrong thing, but also the risks to their colleagues, the risks to their organisation, but the risks to their own career for doing something wrong that could go public very, very quickly. The next one then is about the next C is communications. How do we use it to communicate better within organisations? Is it just certain people who are allowed, or apprentices? The risk is that apprentices only given access when they've reached a certain level, or is it only for a certain department that they can use these tools? And I've seen that over the years where, you know, especially working in the branding space, only certain people have access to Photoshop and so on. But actually, all of a sudden, anybody can go online within the company and use any of the AI tools and create a branded document or branded anything. That creates huge risk. The penultimate one is careers. So on the C piece, especially around apprentices, is looking at what does this actually mean. The reality with AI is it's a tool, it is a partner within the journey of one's career, within the workplace. It could replace jobs, and I'm sure it will. But what does that mean for careers? Do you either look at it as a massive threat, or do you look at it as an opportunity? Those jobs that took hours upon hours upon hours to do previously, for example, one of the companies I used to do work with did psychology AI. And so when you do a qualitative survey and you send it out to 10,000 people and you get the responses back, at the moment, or previously, it would take a team, spend weeks upon weeks to read through all of those, to identify what the emotion was of the response, what was the phrasing, what was the tonality, all of those things. Even back in 2018, there were tools that could do that in 5 minutes. All of a sudden, that's an entire industry potentially gone. So within that, what does that career mean? But actually using that tool means you've got more opportunity as an individual or within your job to then dive in and do more. And then the final word is very simple, which is correct. Is what's being shared through AI correct? Is the guidance being given to apprentices that perhaps someone might say, go and use the AI to work out your career path or whatever it might be? Is it accurate? Is it correct? Is it something that actually takes on board the human nuances? So those are my sort of very, hopefully quite short points. I'd love to go into more detail, but I think across those points, hopefully it covers the main concerns I have about AI, but also the huge opportunities.
Thank you very much, Dean. I think it's incredibly brave to have 8 C's. My memory would fail me after about 3. You talked about the older generation having problems getting to grips with TikTok. I still can't turn my television on. You used to press one button and the television went on. Now you have to press a whole series of things and you can't find where they want. Okay, well, that's got us off to a very good start. I'm going to ask one question while my colleagues are beginning to think, and I don't quite know how we're doing the questions from those who are not with us here, but presumably there is the chat function. So use the chat function, and hopefully somebody will bring it to my attention if there's a question in the chat. I think my question is probably extremely stupid and certainly very simple. It's mainly to Erica, because Erica, you talked about AI tools. I mean, what is an AI tool, and how do you distinguish? Is there a definition that distinguishes AI from what we've always had before in terms of digital? Because it seems to me an awful lot of the things that we say that we're told are great breakthroughs of AI are actually things that were already happening, but weren't thought of in this dramatic world-changing sense. So, of course, it is presumably an evolution. But is there some sort of definitional clarity about what makes an AI tool different from just a digital app?
I think that's a very valid question, and probably the same question being asked for quite a number of people, actually. So you're correct. I mean, AI technology has been around for 30 years. I know professors in university who've been delivering courses on AI for that period of time. And most of us do tend to already use AI in some kind of way, whether that's using Alexa, you know, or Siri on our phones, or even, you know, if you have your weekly groceries delivered to you from a supermarket, you will get recommendations on that app or from Amazon or something like that. The reason why we've talked about it more in the last 12 months is OpenAI brought ChatGPT to market, which we started then using the term generative AI. And there's different species and subspecies of AI, which I won't go into all the detail, but effectively you have what's called a large language model, which is a piece of technology which has been trained on a number of data points, and some of that is training that's been going on for a number of years to get information into the large language model, which feeds the artificial intelligence based on the interaction that you have with it. Or some of it, like some of the more recent things like ChatGPT, Google and Microsoft Copilot, pull that information now from the web and have training points and data that sit within it to respond to you in a certain way. And that's where I think it was mentioned earlier, we have issues around bias in some of the outputs of the large language models that we're currently using. And also what's called hallucinations, where the AI presents data, but it doesn't make any sense. And that's because it doesn't understand context and it doesn't have an agenda. It's not self-aware like we see in the movies and things like that. But there is super AI programs, which is the AI that we're hearing around from healthcare providers that are able to spot things like minutiae amounts of cancer within tissue, for example, or start to predict when someone from, you know, in a healthcare role or a social care role needs to go in and see a patient because the data and the insights starting to tell us, you know, I'm predicting that person might have an accident or there might be something up with their healthcare condition. So it's to answer your question, it's a huge term, but the subspecies of AI, we are focusing very heavily on what's called generative AI at the moment, which is that training data that is responding to you when it's prompted.
Thank you very much. Now, are there any parliamentarians? I don't know how many parliamentarians we've got either on here or not here, but Johnny, do you have any? We've got two.
Actually, boiling my questions down a bit. It's very interesting talking about we can't predict what the issues are going to be at the moment, and I think Dean, talking about your father, I think your automated vehicles bill is just starting in the house. So watch that space on that one. But I'd really like to go, Mary. I thought that was extremely powerful. Thank you very much. And you were talking about fundamental skills. I think I agree with that. I think we're going to be, our kids are going to have to become editors, aren't they? And creative directors, not. But do you think that actually AI will do away? Because a few years ago it was all about don't learn a foreign language, learn coding. Do you think that actually the coding is going to be, so the fundamental skills I think are Microsoft Office at the moment, and as you said, learning how to use emails and things. Can you see a time when actually coding will be done by AI?
So yeah, great question. So coding is already done by AI, and actually even software engineers are already going to be replaced. But if you actually interact with ChatGPT and start coding with ChatGPT, and you test some of the outputs and the code it gives you, it doesn't actually work. So it's not that AI can't replace code or writing code. It's that the people who know how to code know when the code is right and when it's wrong. And that ability to differentiate between good code, bad code in your context is the critical skill there. So I think coding skills, digital skills are really still crucial. But yeah, there are those foundational skills that we still need to agree that are still important, even if AI is super intelligent, is still important for everyday life.
But Dean wants to come in on it.
If you don't mind, yeah. So I'm pretty sure, you might have to fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure Bill Gates has talked about in the next 5 years or so that you won't need to have lots of different types of software. So at the moment, you have to open up Microsoft Word to do a Word document as we get to Excel. The relevant use of AI within the workplace will be, I need a document covering X, Y, and Z. And the AI, and then AI is this sort of mythical thing. I mean, it's so many different variations of it, aren't there? But the idea is the task that you want to achieve will be achieved through the AI then develop, creating that thing, rather than you needing to boot up Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel. Now, I'm sure that won't change that quickly. You know, reality is people are still using, you know, probably Word version, whatever from the 1990s. But over the next 10, 15 years, these things sort of gradually drip into the mainstream, don't they? But that's what I can imagine, that people will just ask, I need a document on X, Y, and Z. And then they will, as you say, become an editor to make it how they want. That's my take anyway.
And I'm sure it will bring with it some challenges that we can't anticipate at the moment. I haven't won my seat event, so I ought to know.
Yes, I'm Charlotte Nichols of the MP Forum.
I'm a co-chair of this group.
I am indeed.
What am I doing?
Well, it was down for the other chair to be chairing today, so I was having a very much non-chair capacity. But no, my question was, and it goes to the point that both of you have raised about sort of biases in what generative AI is using as its information for learning. I mean, this is something you see come up a lot in terms of the sort of civil liberties conversation with things like face recognition, because it tends to be dramatically less accurate for ethnic minority communities, for example. So you sort of, we're already having a bit of a discussion around some of those things here in Westminster. But in terms of media literacy in this country, which I would say is already probably quite poor, what do you think we need to be doing in terms of digital literacy for AI, for people to be able to recognize when something is generated versus is organic and things like that? And I'm thinking of, you know, we're already hearing stuff from schools about, you know, people creating deep fake porn of their classmates and that sort of thing. And some of the, you know, troubling bits and pieces online with, you know, people making videos that appear to be Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak or Biden saying terrible things and all that kind of. What do you think we need as the skills for people to be able to recognize AI before we even get into how to be able to adjust it and fix it and taking outputs from it and being able to edit them? What do you think we need to do in that space?
Can I briefly come in on that? Because I've talked about it, Parliament, actually, I've sort of raised it, and I've actually wanted to do a German debate on it a couple of weeks ago, but I sadly didn't get into Parliament. So my take is there's sort of three bits. First of all, and I'll be really brief. I actually wrote an article probably about a year or two ago about bias and data, because it's often the data set that causes that bias. So if you've got primarily one particular group developing, they might not think that they're needing the groups. And I think the example I used in the article was about, say, sickle cell. If you haven't got the data sets, then AI can't then predict based on that, and therefore wouldn't necessarily predict sickle cell, for example. On the points about how do you protect people, I spoke on a while ago about this idea of what I'd call a Turing clause, which I appreciate is a Turing clause about something totally different, but within AI, which is that anything that's deemed to pretend to be human, so it's the purpose of it is to pretend to be something it's not. I think there should be a warning of some kind, whether it's on TV or on your phone or whatever. And my analogy of it is actually with antiviral software, virus software. In the early, mid 2000s, when people started to get online, all of a sudden there was this massive boom in antivirus, McAfee and all these Norton antivirus, which was a huge industry of its own. I think there should be a concerted effort to do a similar thing so that anybody who's using their phone or their computer or any technology, that as soon as it identifies that that has got AI used in it, so we've got a huge opportunity for industry to create the UK to be a AI policing force, which effectively through technology, if you get, like I've got on here, I've got a text from literally yesterday, which says, where's it gone? It says, hi Dad, my new number, save it and message me to WhatsApp. Well, my daughter was sat next to me when that was sent, so it clearly wasn't her. But actually, my worry on what's going to happen is what I call flash scams. So you'll have AI that will be able to look at people's Facebook, they'll be able to clone someone's voice, they'll be able to phone you individually with that voice and say, "Hi Dad, I've forgotten my phone, can you call me back? And this is the number to send 20 quid to." But at the moment, you need a call centre of hundreds of thousands of people. But with AI, it can do it individually en masse. And so my worry is you'll have these flash scams where AI is used over the space of 10 minutes to contact lots of people. And even if it only works on 0.1%, they could suddenly make a few million quid and then close it down and move on. And so I think that's why this antivirus approach to recognizing on your phone that number's come from a number I've never heard before, that's got a phrase, it's using the word dad, which my daughter would have used a different phrase probably. It would recognize those and use AI to identify that AI is being used, and then it should come up with a little flash on my phone saying, beware of this, and that it could be used for deep fakes, could be all useful sort of thing. That's my solution.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about it in terms of, I'm 32, so what we learn at school around digital skills was like, never putting any of your information online, because everyone in a chat room is a paedophile. And it was this sort of so that was kind of drummed into us at school, that like, you should never put any information online ever about anything. We were taught to, again, if you get sent a link, how you make sure that it is in fact the BBC News website and not these sorts of things. But I look at those skills that my mum, for example, doesn't have, because she was never taught those things growing up, because that wasn't the landscape that she grew up in. So she sends me articles all the time where I have to be like, that's not from the BBC. And those, she's an intelligent woman, she's an accountant. But again, those skills are, I think, things that have got to be embedded. So in terms of trying to get ahead of where the technology is, what is it that we need to be putting in our education institutions to ready people for having that critical awareness around AI?
Any comment on this question?
Yeah, just from, I guess my personal thoughts on this are that firstly, like, there's so much AI around, like one has to declare that what they're doing is AI firstly, so people can distinguish whether that's real human output or AI output. Secondly is teaching skills of verification. I don't use AI unless I can verify what is outputting. Code, for example, I only talk about things that I could understand enough to check on the BBC or cross-reference. But what about if you're learning something new? How do you know what's real and what's fake? So we need to teach people to verify all the outputs. And thirdly, I think this is an issue that people are not understanding what the definition of AI is, how it works underneath, inside. So they're just so vulnerable, they take it as fact, whereas it does hallucinate. And we need to understand that. So declare as AI, verify it, and also understand how it works underneath.
In the old days, when calculators first appeared, one could always do a little sort of check in one's head as to whether and there was one of the Sinclair calculators actually couldn't do a simple multiplication. That somebody discovered there was a bug which made it wouldn't multiply by 11. But of course, AI has got to such a level of complexity. It's very hard to do that. And that might be one of the challenges, how one can come up with verification tools that are reliable. Have we got lots of people on the chat asking questions?
No questions at the moment.
No questions at the moment.
Could I ask a question? It's Philip Bergo as Research Assistant to Lord Lucas. And I loved your description of what you were doing and so on. I learned by machine learning from Donald Mickey. He would have loved your analysis of the issues there. What my question is how do we actually set about educating our generation, those in the workforce, those going forward? Lots of complexities. What we're trying to look at, and this is Lord Lucas and myself, with OC in London, is micro modules where you take specific bits of what you have been doing there and you teach your audience in a short module how to use a particular AI tool to do a particular job and what you need to look around it. And you enable people to assemble these accredited micro modules bit by bit as they need them, as the way of educating large numbers very quickly. Now, given that you have you've got the experience in this. I was then going to ask Erica the same question. Is that actually a good way of approaching it? Obviously, you need the big stuff, the big vision stuff complementary, but when we're trying to teach and educate large numbers of people in short periods of time on things that are very complicated, is that probably the right approach?
That sounds very interesting. Mary, do you want to go first, and then I'll bring in Erica?
Yeah, so I think that's a great approach, Philip. So I'm really lucky in Multiverse. They actually created an AI Jumpstart module for all apprentices, regardless if they're doing technical subjects. That's an 8-hour course. It teaches you what AI is, how to look at AI policies in your organization, in your sort of education institution, how it kind of works, the basics, ethics parts, and also how to use it. So absolutely. I think we need to be pragmatic. Most people don't have time to really understand what's going on with AI, but they need to know just enough to help enable them to apply it in whatever domain they are, intelligently and ethically. So something like micro modules, compulsory micro modules would be fantastic. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Sounds like a really good idea to me. Erica, any thoughts on this idea of learning in a micro-modular form? A micro-module probably about as much as I could cope with anyway. Probably a mini micro-module.
I think it's a wonderful idea for those people who are able to study in that manner, and that works, but that isn't everybody, and that won't be as inclusive as what we actually need. So someone who's neurodiverse, like myself, will have a need to learn in a different way than, maybe an accreditation, online learning, for example. So a lot of the stuff that we're currently doing, which seems to be landing quite well, is having people practically use ChatGPT, Gamma, Google, whatever large language models or whatever bots or software you're using, in a what's in it for me perspective. So running a workshop last week with 40 people in a room and 30 online, we set the precedent and the hackathon to come up with the most creative way of how Gen AI can help you in your personal life. And we had people using ChatGPT to position things like, I'm going to go home tonight and I've got 4 ingredients in my fridge. I want the AI to tell me what the best recipe I could use that's going to be most healthy, or asking the question, I've got a relative in my family who I never know what to buy for Christmas. So if these are the parameters I'm going to give you around that person, what should I buy them for Christmas? So actually using it in our personal lives, taking the human approach first, and that's where those distinctive skills come in. People will be learning without even realizing that they're learning. So it's not a black or white response, but we need to make this digestible and simple for as many people as possible, as well as the formal learning education routes as well.
Thank you. Now, I'm just going to warn the 3 speakers that when we get close to the end, I'm going to give each of them a chance to speak for no more than a minute to wrap things up. So just so that they aren't taken by surprise. This is the Apprenticeships APPG, and I'm learning a great deal about AI, and I'm learning a little bit about where it fits with certain apprenticeships. I mean, one of the things, the questions, the issues we're looking at is how the government can promote the integrated use of AI to improve apprenticeships offerings. So I wonder if any of our speakers have thoughts on, should AI be a required element of every apprenticeship, for example, at one extreme, or what should we be looking for in terms of making sure that apprenticeships do include an appropriate element of AI? Where should I go to? Well, why don't I start with you first?
Sure. I'll try my best. I think if I were to add a 9C to my list of things, it would be the word convenience, and I think it's about making sure it's convenient. It's just in the picture. I should have asked AI. It's just more it's an easy way to remember things. But the reason why I say convenience is that I think whatever apprentices and apprenticeships are incredibly, they're tough things to do, but they're brilliant things, and they're incredibly valuable, and they teach amazing skills. I think when governments try and force extra things into curricula for any form, it suddenly becomes, it can sometimes be a distraction from what's actually needed, and sometimes it's absolutely valuable. So I think that convenience bit needs to be part of the convenient approach for teaching it, for using it, for applying it. I'm also very, very conscious that technology moves so quickly. So, who would have thought Google would still be around today? I know when they were offered to be bought by Yahoo, I think it was, they turned them down 20 odd years ago, probably longer than that. So you can never quite predict what's going to be the next big thing. So I think the skills of being able to be inquisitive, to question what you've been shown and what's been created, and be creative in terms of the approach to using these things are the skills that are best to be taught, rather than can you use ChatGPT, because in 2 years' time, that will be something totally different.
Okay, that's a good answer. Mary, anything on that question?
No, I broadly agree. I think, students are already using it. That's the thing. They're already using it. So they need to be guided on how to use it ethically and intelligently, and a way to level up their learning, not to replace it, but to make it even better. But yeah, I broadly agree with you.
Okay.
My only build on that is the gap around our educators and teachers and trainers being confident to use this as a learning tool. And there's some great examples out there, but there's massive gaps where people don't have the confidence or capability. And when you're, running huge curriculums or large caseloads of learners, which a lot of apprenticeship assessors and coaches and teachers are, you don't always have the energy and the headspace to say, right, I'm going to go and teach myself how I can use this within my learning. So I think we really need to dial up the what's in it for me and the buy-in for our educators, because you're right, from a learner, student, apprentice perspective, particularly, Gen Z, you get that skill set, that curiosity. They bring that into the workplace already. It might need to be refined from a behavioural framework perspective, as been spoken about. But I think if our educators don't embrace it, that's where we've got part of the problem.
Thank you, Erica. Have we got any questions for anybody coming in?
I believe someone had their hand up.
Lizzie Gauntlet.
It was Lizzie, was it? Lizzie, do you have a question?
Hi, thanks so much. Yeah, I just wanted to flag that the chat's actually disabled. So if you feel like people haven't had questions, that might be why. Sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm Senior Policy Officer from the Federation of Awarding Bodies. So we're kind of approaching this from a different point of view with apprenticeships. We're looking at what are the challenges, what are the opportunities for endpoint assessment organisations, so in terms of actually when those apprentices are coming through. And I thought it was really interesting, Erica, what you had to say about people in different organisations, or even people within the same organisations, feeling that fear or being at different places with how willing they are to accept the changes that are coming. So we've got some AOs who are worried about malpractice that might be coming through from apprentices, and how they can kind of stave this off. But then we've also got other EPAOs who are very much looking to embrace it in terms of how they're using new assessment methods and making clear to apprentices and providers and employers how they are permitted to use AI. So I was just wondering, perhaps from an apprentice point of view, how do you kind of feel, is that kind of appropriate for you, Mary, in terms of undertaking some of your assessments and things like that you'd be expected to use AI, or do you feel like you need clearer guidance from your endpoint assessor on what's actually permitted?
Thank you, Lizzie, and congratulations on getting through the barrier.
I tried, I broke it down.
Did put your hand up, didn't you? So maybe putting a hand up is a better way of letting us know you're interested. Mary.
Yes, so it's a great question. So my endpoint assessment for my degree is in a few years, so it's about 2025, around that time. So I don't know what it looks like. I know we do have an AI policy that is very clear that if you use AI, you need to change a significant proportion. Otherwise, you need to reference it like you would reference any other source. So that's very clear. But when it comes to endpoint assessment, I can't comment because I haven't seen it.
Okay. Any other comments from anybody? No hands have gone up. No, the chat is unavailable. Very, very good way of running things. I think. Well, let's ask each of our speakers then. We're within 5 minutes of our ending time, so you've got 1.5 minutes each, I think, in that case. And Erica, let's go in the same sequence as before.
Yeah, so I guess if you look at the research from the World Economic Forum that tells us that 66% of children who are in school right now between the age of 5 and 11 will go into a job that doesn't even exist yet. So 2/3 of the kids, our kids that are in school right now, are likely to go into a job that doesn't exist yet. We need to backtrack to understand how is education enabling and providing these skills and careers for people to look into that crystal ball that we can't see. One thing we do know is our foundation of technical knowledge that gives us power and gives us confidence. We're not going to be able to rely on that in an AI-centric world, because the AI is going to do a lot of that and hold a lot of that data for us. So we need to get people embracing what the art of the possible is with their own careers, whether that's a career I can't see right now, or a career I'm going to change quite quickly, I'm going to sidestep into, I'm going to do something for a couple of years, do an apprenticeship, sidestep into a different apprenticeship. So my plea, my beg, my ask is that we think about the skills that sit around any kind of technical adoption, digital adoption, and start to map out what our specialisms look like when we know that AI is going to take a certain element of those tasks off our pad. And that is that we've talked about already, the critical thinking, the learning agility, the being able to pick something up and drop it and apply new skills in record times. So when we look at apprenticeships and what that means and how that gets people ready, no longer can we rely on a static curriculum that teaches concepts and theories, which we see very much in the kind of leadership type apprenticeships. Actually, we need to be agile and use things like hackathons and the approach that organizations like Multiverse use to be flexible and enable people to carve out those careers that we can't see yet. And AI is going to be one of the best tools that we can adopt to do that.
Thank you very much. And you've given me a very good lead in. Fact, I've been sitting on a committee which has been looking at the education system for 11 to 16-year-olds. Our report is going to be published tomorrow. I think many of the issues you sort of raised in a tangential way about our current education focus not being really fit for purpose, unless you happen to be an absolute obsessive about doing very well in GCSEs, in which case it is quite good. But never mind, read the report, it's very good. Mary, over to you. I've used half your time already, I'm afraid.
Okay. So I think this is a great time to be an apprentice right now. Yeah. If I was in university, I'd be like, oh, you know what? My curriculum is going to be the same for the next 3 years. The world is going to change so much. But because we're applying everything now in the real world, we can't afford to be stuck. Everything's always moving. So it's a great time to be an apprentice. I think the apprenticeship curriculums have to be dynamic in order for apprentices to actually use modern tooling and apply that in their setting. And I think we need to not forget those critical thinking skills, the ability to interrogate algorithms, think about bias, and using these systems ethically. That's not going to change, AI or no AI. These critical thinking skills are really, really important to still teach.
Thank you very much. And you have got a second or two left.
Fantastic. I won't give you another C. My closing remarks. So I think the key point to me, there's a big learning from the rise of social media. As someone who had a career that was shaped by it and hopefully in small ways shaped it, in very small ways. I think there's a learning that we should, rather than just let this stuff run amok and then see where it goes, we should make decisions as a society where we can best employ it to make a big difference. For example, in the education space, how do we make sure that students are at the heart of everything? That AI, I have no doubt over the next few years, will adapt so that a child with dyslexia can be taught in a very particular way that benefits them, so they can be the best they can be compared to a child with other perhaps learning challenges, that we can help make sure that we adapt to the person rather than people adapt to it. Which I think is what's happened over the past few years. The second part, I think, is looking at what the other big problems are, which is often about big corporations, big organisations, and the way that they work. So if you look at the NHS, when you get to see a nurse and a doctor, they're amazing. But actually, the process of getting through that with appointments and papers and all this stuff is very complex. Historically, the challenge has been developing big IT systems. I think AI over the next 5-10 years means that the patient will be centred, the single patient view will be much more simplified and won't necessarily cost billions to do, but actually AI can solve those problems and connect those dots. And then finally, I think it's about then the education, not forcing people to have to learn new things, but being sceptical enough to be able to question stuff, whilst also not being so fearful they don't embrace it. And I think my points about looking at an antivirus analogy for how we make sure people are protected from AI being used to scam them or to fool them or deepfakes and all those things, enabling and being the UK being the hub of AI to police AI, I think is such a great opportunity for us and something that will make us both world leading and protect citizens in the UK and around the world.
Thank you very much, Dean. I think we're out of time. I'd just like to thank all our speakers. Erica, thank you to you. Mary, especially good to hear from an actual apprentice very much in the front line of this particular issue. And Dean, your input as well. Thank you to everybody who's here in the room. I do apologise to those of you who are watching remotely that we have managed to prevent you from, most of you, from making any contribution, but we probably have run even more over time. And thank you to the co-chair of the group for allowing me, if that's the right word, to stand in on this occasion. So thanks to everybody, and on we go with the exciting and alarming world of AI and how we get to grips with this and make sure that it comes out as a very definite positive as opposed to an alarming negative. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you so much.